If you're not carrying enough speed into fast corners, you're leaving lots and lots of time on the table. In this video, I'm going to explain the most common mistakes that drivers make when entering a fast corner and how they can change their technique to go in quicker and ultimately reduce lap time. I'm Scott Mansell, head coach from Driver 61, where we create fast drivers who feel in total control and ultimately win championships. So typically, drivers will enter slow corners too quickly and fast corners too slowly. And when we're driving into a fast corner, it isn't about being brave. When we're driving on track, we shouldn't be being brave. If you're needing to be brave, then it means that you don't exactly know what the outcome will be as you enter a corner, and nobody wants that. So I'm not saying that we just sit back in the seat and really go for it in a fast corner. I'm going to teach you techniques and strategies so that you can enter corners much more quickly. So the first mistake that I see in fast corners is that a driver simply won't be looking far enough ahead. But when you're thinking about your vision, we need to be thinking in terms of time rather than distance. And that means the faster that we're going, the further ahead in terms of distance that we're actually looking, because you're going to arrive there more quickly. The faster the corner, the further we need to look ahead. Now, this is a challenging thing because our natural reaction when we feel like we're going fast or going too fast sometimes is for our vision to become narrow and close to the car. So it's really important that at this point you try to remain conscious and move yourself ahead with your vision. Scan back to where you are, look ahead again. I've got plenty of videos on the Driver 61 channel that explain this in more detail, but try to be conscious about where you're looking and when you're scanning back and forward through a corner. Do this, and that means that you'll be able to carry more speed into the corner. Your line will be much better because you'll be giving yourself the right information at the right time and have much more flow as you go through the corner. The next mistake that I see is that a driver will dab the brakes or have a confidence dab. Now, this is not a good strategy. We should never be dabbing the brakes. What we want the car to do when we enter the corner is be as stable as possible, especially a quick corner. The quicker the corner, the more gentle we need to be with the car as we turn it in, so lateral force, but also the pitch, the longitudinal force as we're braking or lifting or whatever we're doing. It wants to be really gentle as we move the weight to the front of the car. And so if you have a dab on the brake as you're entering a quick corner, the front of the car just dives down very quickly and then comes back up again. Now, what you're doing here is you're shifting the balance, the weight, very quickly to the front and then back to the rear again. And if you do this while you're turning in, then all of a sudden the front will have an amount of grip and then it will drop out of the front again as the weight transfers very quickly. And from a driving perspective, this gives you a lack of confidence in the car because it's impossible to understand where or how much grip the car's got. If you're able to dab the brakes like this as you enter a quick corner, you're not going in quickly enough. If you were going in on the limit and you dab the brakes, then the car would slide in a really horrible way. And you need to do everything that you can to make things as smooth as possible in a quick corner. So what I would suggest is that you begin actually braking a little bit earlier, but with much less pressure. That way the car isn't diving anywhere near as much as you enter the corner and the platform will be a lot more stable. Then you could possibly progress to a lift, but a gentle lift, not just from 100 to 0 like this, gently getting the weight to the front of the car. And when you do this, you'll have that much more stable base and you'll be generating more grip than you did when you were just dabbing the brakes. Hence, you'll be able to carry more speed into the corner. Along similar lines as not dabbing the brakes, we don't want to be just turning the car in very aggressively. If you do that, we transfer the weight to the outside of the car very quickly, and it means that the car will slide in a very unfriendly way. As I mentioned, we want to be loading the car up in a quick corner as gently as we possibly can. So if you find yourself turning the car in very quickly, have a think about your vision. Typically, if the vision isn't in the right place, we're having to make a very quick decision to turn the car into the corner because we only realise where the apex is very late. Whereas if you're kind of looking at the apex nice and early and looking through the corner, then you can actually understand the line and you'll be much more accurate with the line. This is something that I can see quite a lot on track days, where there'll be a braking cone, a turning cone and an apex cone. People kind of get to the turning cone, turn, look at the apex cone, get there, and they're always one step behind where they should be. You know, when we're braking or entering the corner, we should already be looking at the apex. So if you're doing track days, try to ignore that turning cone, try to ignore all the cones together, in fact, and visualize your own line through the corner. Now, oftentimes, if you're having to decelerate going into a fast corner, some drivers will be using a braking reference. So they'll be getting to the turning board, they'll be on the brakes and then getting the car into the apex. Now, the problem with this is if you're focusing on a braking reference and then moving your vision to the apex, it's all happening too late. You don't have time to have your vision on the outside and then look to the apex, because you're going so quickly and you're entering so quickly that it all happens too quickly. So what I would suggest here is that you do have your main focus on the apex, and if you do need a point for you to lift off or brake slightly, then try to use your peripheral vision or a physical reference like a bump. Now that's difficult because, you know, sometimes the bumps aren't in the right place if they're there at all. But definitely don't use your focus on a braking point and then move your vision to the apex, because you just don't have the time in a quick corner. Going into a hairpin or a tight chicane, yes, you can look at the braking point, get on the brakes and then look at the apex, because you have the time, you have the braking distance to be able to do that. And one of the biggest things that I see is that drivers, once they're at the limit and they're carrying the speed into the corner, they'll get caught in this negative feedback loop where they're dabbing the brakes or lifting off very harshly, and the car will oversteer on the entry. And they see that as being the absolute limit. Now, the limit isn't a static line. We can change the amount of grip a car's got depending on our own technique. And so if a car is over braking and then turning into the corner, the front is all loaded up and the rear doesn't have much grip at this point. The thing is, when drivers go into a quick corner, they can get caught there and believing that that's as fast as the car can go. And this is something that I see with the hundreds of drivers that I've coached during my training programs. They'll get to a point and say, okay, that's it. However, if you kind of reverse engineer what the car's doing or what it's limited by, whether that's the front or the rear, and then adapt your technique based on that, you'll actually be able to generate more grip and have a more stable car. Because rather than diving down and turning in, we actually ease it down, let the front of the car come back up, making the car more stable, and then we can go through the corner more quickly. I've put together a short playlist of the techniques that you can improve on to generate even more lap time and ultimately win races. Just click on the video up here to continue learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.